What if I told you that the blade that cuts the deepest never arrives from the front? It arrives wrapped in trust, spoken in familiar tones, held by the very hand you once believed would protect you. Because betrayal, true betrayal, never comes from strangers. It never comes from enemies. It comes from the ones who knew how to get close enough to aim for the heart and not miss. The modern world has sanitized this truth. We speak of loyalty as if it were default, as if connection implied allegiance. But in power, in politics, in love, loyalty is not promised. It is negotiated, maintained, and it is always conditional. You were taught to open up, to trust freely, to build relationships on transparency and emotion. But Machiavelli would scoff at this illusion. He understood something few are willing to accept. The closer someone stands to you, the more leverage they hold over your downfall. Let us begin with the illusion of safety. A general never fears the enemy he can see. He fears the spy who sleeps in his tent. He fears the soldier who knows the layout of the camp, the guard who knows when the gate is unlocked. Likewise, in life, the people closest to you, friends, family, even lovers, they know your passwords, your patterns, your insecurities, and they know exactly where the blade must go to bring everything crashing down. History confirms this again and again. Caesar was not killed by a barbarian. He was not slain by a foreigner. He was stabbed in the Senate by the very men who claimed to serve him. Brutus, the man he trusted as a son, carved his name into legacy with betrayal. And that is the nature of betrayal. It requires intimacy. It requires trust. It requires a relationship so close that when it breaks, it doesn't just fall, it shatters. You see, strangers cannot betray you. Only those inside the gates can. Why? Because betrayal is not the act of being hurt. It is the act of being disarmed before being hurt. The enemy shouts, the betrayer whispers, the enemy attacks, the betrayer embraces, the enemy marches toward you, the betrayer walks beside you, and therein lies the tragedy. Not in the pain, but in the surprise, in the realization that everything you believed was secure was in fact a trap patiently constructed around your trust. So why does betrayal so often come from those closest to us? Because proximity breeds knowledge, and knowledge is power's sharpest weapon. The people around you learn your rhythm. They learn what makes you proud, what makes you jealous, what makes you afraid. They learn how to echo your dreams back to you, until you confuse agreement with loyalty, until you mistake their presence for protection. But some people do not orbit you because they admire your light. They orbit you because they're calculating your burn radius and waiting for you to glow too bright. You will not be ruined by your enemies. They want to beat you, not become you. You will be ruined by those who sit silently smiling while building their case against you brick by brick, word by word, moment by moment, until the moment arrives when you have something they want. And in that moment, the mask slips, the truth reveals itself, and the knife is already pressed against your spine. The tragedy is that most men do not prepare for betrayal because they assume that love or history or friendship is armor. It is not. It is camouflage, because those closest to you are not always the ones protecting your throne. Sometimes they are simply waiting for you to fall asleep in it. Now some will say, but not everyone is like that. And yes, not everyone is. But Machiavelli did not concern himself with utopia. He concerned himself with risk, and proximity is risk. He wrote, "The prince must learn to act as both beast and man. The lion protects by force, but the fox protects by awareness, by knowing the traps laid near his den. If you walk through life with only the eyes of the lion, you will miss the silent betrayals gathering like fog behind your back. What the wise man does, what the strategist must do, is scan not for the loud opposition, but for the quiet envy, for the silent comparisons, for the friend who asks too much, who praises too easily, who never challenges you directly, but mimics your steps until they've learned how to replace you. This is not paranoia, this is preparation, because power is not lost in war, it is lost in comfort, in assuming the people around you are mirrors, when in fact they may be shadows. Think of the man who tells you, "I would never do that to you." He may believe it until the opportunity arises. Think of the woman who swears allegiance. She may be loyal until loyalty costs her more than betrayal offers. This is the brutal truth most cannot stomach. People betray not because they are evil, but because it becomes useful, and usefulness is more seductive than loyalty. So ask yourself, who do you allow close? Not who you talk to. Who do you trust? Who do you let see your plans? Who do you let hear your doubts? Who do you let know where you're soft? Because when betrayal comes, and it always comes, it will not come from the crowd. It will not come from the stranger. It will not come from the critic. It will come from the one who said, "I've got your back," and that's exactly where the blade will land. Now let us take this further. It is not merely that betrayal comes from the closest ones, it is that closeness itself is often engineered with betrayal in mind. What appears to be affection is sometimes reconnaissance. What seems like loyalty is sometimes surveillance, and what you perceive as emotional intimacy may in truth be a calculated infiltration of your defenses. Never forget, there are those who attach themselves not out of love, but out of strategy. They mirror you, not because they revere you, but because they are learning your rhythm, preparing for the moment they no longer need you. The apprentice does not always remain the apprentice. Sometimes he sharpens his blade behind your throne, waiting for the moment the teacher looks away. This is not pessimism, this is power literacy. Because when you understand betrayal, not as an act of emotional chaos, but as a move in a larger game, everything begins to make sense. People betray because they see an opening, because the benefits outweigh the risk, because you made it easy. You gave them access, and access is the currency of destruction. Think of a fortress. Its walls are tall, its gates secured, its watchmen alert. From the outside, it appears impenetrable, but a single key placed in the wrong hands renders all its defenses meaningless. The traitor doesn't need to scale the wall, he only needs to be invited inside. Most men fall not because they are weak, but because they are unguarded. They believe proximity equals safety, but in the world of power, proximity is never neutral. It either strengthens your position or undermines it. It is either alliance or espionage. Consider this: every emperor has his Judas, every king his Brutus. Every powerful man, if he is not vigilant, will one day host his own assassin, not at the gates but at the dinner table. And when the betrayal arrives, it will not be chaotic, it will be clean. The best betrayals are quiet. The best betrayals do not announce themselves. They are carried out with surgical precision, disguised as coincidence, framed as necessity, executed under the illusion of innocence. And the truly dangerous traitor, he doesn't even see himself as one. He rationalizes, he reframes, he tells himself that he had no choice, that you changed, that you forgot who helped you build. But make no mistake, betrayal is rarely spontaneous. It is slow, it is brewed over time. It is the sum of resentments left unspoken, ambitions left unfulfilled, opportunities left unlocked, until finally, the moment arrives when betrayal becomes more convenient than loyalty. Machiavelli understood this with terrifying clarity. He wrote, "Men are less hesitant about harming someone who makes himself loved than someone who makes himself feared, because love is preserved by a link of obligation which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken whenever personal advantage suggests it." And there it is. Love is not stronger than ambition. Loyalty is not stronger than opportunity. You think people will remember what you did for them, but they only remember what they need. And when you no longer serve that need, the memory fades, the affection fades, and in its place grows a question: what can I gain by removing him? You fed them, you built with them, you suffered beside them, but the moment you stand between them and their next step, you are no longer a brother, you are a barrier, and barriers get removed. This is why the powerful must never assume affection equals safety. You can be loved and still be destroyed. You can be admired and still be replaced. You can be the reason someone rises and still be the reason they want you gone. Because gratitude has a short memory, but envy remembers everything, especially the nights they felt small beside you, especially the moments they saw you win and smiled, but clenched their fists behind their back, especially the days they told themselves, "One day, that will be me, and he'll be the one watching." So what does the strategist do? He does not isolate, he orchestrates. He does not expose his whole self. He reveals only what is necessary. He does not hand out trust like coins. He guards it like a throne, because he knows every circle has a snake, every alliance has a weak link, every smile carries a probability. And it is not paranoia, it is probability that demands his attention. You must remember, the closer someone is to you, the more damage they can do. So you measure access, you filter your proximity, and you make sure that nobody, not even your dearest friend, ever holds the full map to your empire. Leave some rooms locked, leave some corridors unlit, leave some thoughts unspoken, not out of fear, but out of respect for the game you are playing. The king who shows every card invites betrayal. The king who hides in plain sight commands fear, and fear is remembered long after affection fades. Most men assume betrayal is a loud fracture, a dramatic collapse, but the truth is more surgical, more elegant in its cruelty. Betrayal operates in silence. It simmers in the shadows, cloaked in false loyalty, pacing with patience. The ones who betray you do not begin as enemies. They begin as spectators. They observe, they listen, they offer help, they validate, and as your guard lowers, their understanding grows, until they no longer admire you, they calculate you, and calculation is always a prelude to conquest. Understand this, the most effective betrayal is never born from hatred. It is born from proximity without power, from being too close to greatness and too far from ownership. They sit beside you, they smile, but inside, a quiet resentment builds. Not always out of malice, but out of misalignment, because they begin to ask themselves, why him? Why not me? This is the betrayal of the almost equal, the one who walks just behind you, convinced that he deserves your place, but unable for now to take it. And as the gap widens, so does the risk, because that man will not shout, he will not challenge you, he will bide his time, he will learn your flaws, he will learn your schedule, he will learn you better than you know yourself, because he is not watching as a friend, he is watching as a future replacement. This is why the strategist never lets comfort blind him to contrast. Machiavelli knew that power without awareness is suicide in slow motion. He warned, the prince must take care never to place his trust in newly won allies. Why? Because proximity bought by opportunity is loyalty built on sand. When the winds change, that loyalty crumbles and your kingdom collapses with it. But today, people hand out proximity like candy. They confuse friendliness for loyalty. They mistake shared laughter for shared mission. And they are shocked, heartbroken, when those same smiles become shadows, when the helper becomes the hunter, when the one who once supported your rise becomes the architect of your fall. But betrayal is not shocking, it is mathematical. Give the wrong person access, and they will not protect you. They will study you. They will memorize the way you move, the way you trust, the way you slip, and they will wait, quietly, for the moment when their ambition outweighs their gratitude. This is where betrayal is born, not in a single moment, but in accumulated silence, in conversations never spoken aloud, in comparisons made in secret, in slow-burning envy, masked as obedience. You see, the truly dangerous are not the loud critics. They are the silent contenders, the ones who say nothing but notice everything, and eventually they will make a move. Not when you're at your weakest, but when you're at your most confident, when your guard is down, when your empire is booming. Because that's when your awareness fades, that's when you stop watching, that's when you start trusting, and that moment is the opening. So what does the strategist do? He watches the watchers. He guards the gates, but also the dining hall. He checks the locks, but also the conversations whispered behind closed doors. Because betrayal is always preceded by one thing: access mixed with resentment. You must learn to feel it. The shift in tone, the overly agreeable nods, the delayed eye contact, the strange silences that follow your victories. Pay attention to the applause. Some people clap because they're proud of you. Others clap because they want you distracted. Because applause can be noise, and noise can be cover. This is not fear, this is wisdom. Because only a fool leaves his kingdom unguarded in times of peace. The wise ruler knows peace is when betrayal breeds fastest. Because in war, everyone's focus is clear. But in peace, that's when the calculations begin. That's when people imagine new futures. That's when someone in your circle starts to wonder, what if I ran this? So don't just look for enemies, look for aspirants, those who orbit you with no clear purpose, those who flatter but never offer friction, those who praise your mind but ask to borrow your plans, those who stand in every room you walk into but never seem to speak unless you're looking. These are not friends, they are rehearsals, they are running simulations, and the moment they sense your focus slipping, the performance begins. You will never hear the first strike, because the best betrayal makes no sound. You simply wake up, and everything you built, your team, your trust, your name, is no longer yours. And in its place stands the one you let too close, the one you trained, the one you defended, the one you believed in. And that's why betrayal is not a crack, it is a mirror. It shows you exactly where you failed to see. Let us now turn the blade inward, because the most ruthless truth Machiavelli ever whispered was this: you participated in your own betrayal, not through weakness, not through failure, but through something more dangerous: attachment. You believed loyalty was owed because of history. You believed proximity implied protection. You believed that years of shared struggle meant they would never trade you in for a faster route. And in doing so, you committed the first error of the unguarded ruler. You assumed memory equals loyalty, but memory fades, incentive lingers. Never forget, the people closest to you are not living inside your mind. They are living inside theirs. Your sacrifices, your kindness, your loyalty, they are pages in your story. But to them, they are stepping stones, temporary alliances, strategic leverage. You fed their hunger and thought that meant they would feed yours. But some men do not seek to build with you. They seek to feed until they can build without you, and your mistake was not kindness, it was blindness. You confused silence for safety. You thought that because they said nothing, they planned nothing. But stillness does not mean peace. Stillness often means preparation. Think of the lion. It does not roar before it strikes. It crouches, waits, studies. The same is true of betrayal. The quieter they become, the closer the moment arrives. So the wise strategist begins with this principle. Everyone is capable of betrayal. Everyone, even those you love, especially those you trust. Because betrayal is not about morality, it is about cost versus reward. If remaining loyal costs them more than betraying you, the scales begin to tip. Machiavelli saw it clearly. Men are driven by necessity more than by love. When need rises, principles fall, and your mistake is assuming their principles are stronger than their hunger. That is why the strategist never creates a system that relies on perfect loyalty. Instead, he builds around predictable incentives. He does not ask, will they betray me? He asks when. He does not fear disloyalty. He anticipates it, structures around it, designs with escape hatches, decoys, and redundancies. The modern man cries, how could they do this to me? The Machiavellian man already knew the risk before he granted access, and so he suffers no shock. He loses no step. Because every relationship is weighed, every alliance is clocked, and every inner circle member is kept under quiet surveillance, not with paranoia, but with discipline. Because betrayal is a human constant, you do not outrun it, you outposition it, and to do that, you must first detach. Detach from your need to be loved, detach from the fantasy that loyalty is permanent, detach from the idea that your goodness guarantees protection. It does not. In fact, goodness, when exposed too openly, invites betrayal. Because it makes you predictable, soft, easy to map, and anything that can be fully mapped can be overtaken. The wise man then becomes a contradiction, warm to the world but cold to outcome, generous in presence but ruthless in structure. He builds connections with care, but his foundations are forged in strategy. He smiles but never sleeps, because while others seek belonging, he seeks leverage, not to control, but to ensure control is never lost. Because he knows every empire falls not from external war, but from internal erosion. Not from the enemy at the gates, but from the friend at the table. And so he trains himself in the art of invisible positioning. He never gives one man too much, never shows one path in full, never allows himself to be owned by sentiment. Love, yes. Trust, perhaps, but full emotional exposure, never. That is a luxury reserved for those with nothing to lose. You, if you are building something great, must never grant that luxury. Instead, you play the long game. You allow people in, but you leave parts of yourself unlit. You speak, but you never empty the vault. You give, but always keep the lever in your own hand. This is not coldness, this is survival. Because even now, as you hear these words, someone near you is watching, measuring, testing your patterns. And they are deciding. Let us now enter the phase few speak about. Not the betrayal itself, but the aftermath. Because betrayal is not merely a moment, it is a shift. A severing, a revelation that echoes long after the knife is removed. And in that silence, after the dust settles, you will be faced with a choice. Do you collapse, or do you become something else entirely? The naive man mourns the loss. He clutches the memory of loyalty, tries to rewind time, asks questions that have no answers. Why did they do it? When did they change? What did I miss? But the strategist does not mourn. He extracts. He studies the betrayal like a map. He analyzes what was shown, what was overlooked, what was granted too freely. Because betrayal, for all its pain, is one of life's clearest audits. It shows you exactly where you were exposed, where you were blind, where you wanted to be loved more than you wanted to be guarded. And if you're wise, if you are truly building something unbreakable, you use betrayal as a blueprint. It shows you who can never be allowed back in. It shows you what information must always remain segmented. It shows you which patterns of speech, of access, of affection left you vulnerable. Because betrayal is not a curse, it is a signal. The untrained man sees it as injustice, but the Machiavellian sees it as tuition, the price of clarity, the fee for access to truth. And what is that truth? That power must always be shielded, even from those closest. That trust must be earned again and again, never assumed. That silence is not absence, it is protection. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, when one must choose between the two, because love creates comfort, fear creates pause, and in that pause, in that moment where others think twice, lies your safety." This is not a call to cruelty, it is a call to presence, a call to exist, not as a victim of closeness, but as a master of access. You must understand, your presence is currency. Your attention, your time, your insight, these are not gifts, they are investments. And the moment you begin treating them as such, betrayal loses its power, because you no longer hand them out indiscriminately. You no longer assume that shared blood, or shared memories, or shared pain equates to shared vision. You verify, you observe, you test, and if someone fails that test, you do not announce it, you adjust, you do not explode, you reposition, because the strategist does not need revenge, he needs clarity, and clarity, once earned, changes everything. You begin to see patterns, you begin to predict betrayal before it occurs, you begin to notice how certain people only show up when you win, how they laugh harder when others doubt you, how they remain silent in rooms where your name is under fire. These are not random behaviors, they are indicators, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. But what separates the tactician from the amateur is not what he notices, it's what he does next. The amateur calls it out, the tactician withdraws access, he leaves the stage, not with a scream, but with silence. Because silence is the most strategic response to betrayal. It confuses the betrayer. It forces them to fill in the blanks. It keeps them uncertain, off balance, wondering whether you've noticed and what you plan to do. And in that vacuum, your power grows. Because the man who does not react is the man no one can read. And the man no one can read is the man no one can predict. And unpredictability, in a world of envy, ambition, and performance, is your greatest weapon. So ask yourself now, clearly and without emotion, who knows too much? Who feels too entitled to your plans, your process, your peace? Who has drifted from supporter to competitor? And more importantly, what will you do when they make their move? Because they will. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but proximity, unfiltered and unguarded, always becomes temptation. And temptation, once it lingers, eventually becomes action. The weak act out of emotion, but the clever wait. And if you are not prepared for the clever, you will lose not to force, but to familiarity. That is the death that stings the most, the one wrapped in names you trusted. But if you heed this now, if you harden your structure, tighten your access, and master the art of presence without exposure, then betrayal no longer breaks you, it exposes them, and the moment a betrayer reveals themselves, their power is gone, because the only weapon they had was the illusion that they were on your side. Once that illusion breaks, all that remains is a shadow and a new wall built in its place. And that wall, my friend, is how kingdoms stay standing. And so we arrive at the final truth, the one that most will refuse to accept. That betrayal is not the enemy of the powerful, it is the price, it is the toll collected at every gate of ascent. It is the shadow that walks beside every leader, every builder, every strategist. It is not to be feared, it is to be factored in, because the man who rises will always outgrow someone's expectations, and when he does, those who cannot rise with him will turn against him. Not always out of hatred, not even always out of jealousy, sometimes simply because your presence reminds them of what they are not, and that mirror, that cold, reflective glass of inadequacy, is unbearable to those who lack discipline, direction, or self-respect. You did not ask to be their comparison, but they made you the standard. And now every time you speak, every time you win, every time you rise without apology, you pull something primal from them, a whisper that says, "He does not need me, he is passing me, he is becoming something I never will." And so betrayal becomes not just an option, it becomes relief. Their exit from your orbit masked as revenge, their moment to feel powerful, not by building something of their own, but by breaking a piece of yours. But here's the cruel beauty Machiavelli understood. It never works. Because betrayal rarely leads to elevation, it leads to exposure. And while they may strike you once, the strategist never bleeds twice. You endure the pain, yes. You absorb the lesson, yes. But you never forget the angle of attack. And from that moment forward, a new version of you is born, sharper, colder, cleaner in judgment. Because the man who survives betrayal and chooses not to shrink becomes something else. He becomes unreadable, he becomes untouchable, he becomes the man who speaks less, reveals nothing, and watches everything. He no longer believes in the myth of unconditional loyalty. He no longer chases unity over structure. He no longer explains himself to anyone because he has seen what people do with your explanations. He moves in silence now, not because he fears others, but because he respects himself. Because every word, every plan, every alliance is now filtered through wisdom purchased in blood. And so the final transformation begins. He stops reacting, he starts calculating. He stops offering access. He starts observing intentions. He stops believing in the mask. He starts scanning for the eyes behind it. This is not bitterness. It is alignment with reality, with human nature, with the mathematics of proximity and risk. You see, the world wants you soft. It wants you transparent. It wants you open. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew the most dangerous man is not the one who attacks. It is the one who cannot be read, the one who leaves people wondering. The one who enters a room and others lower their voice. The one who has been betrayed and still builds, still leads, still wins, not in spite of betrayal, but because of it. And now I ask you directly, ruthlessly, without apology, are you ready for this version of yourself? Are you ready to stop expecting loyalty from those who have not earned it? Are you ready to start seeing people for what they do, not what they say? Are you ready to design your empire in a way that even if every friend turns, your foundation does not crack? Then write this in the comments. I expect betrayal, I build anyway. Let it be a signal to those watching you. Let it be the echo of a man who is no longer surprised, only prepared. And if this message resonated, don't stop here. The next video is waiting. It's not entertainment, it's a weapon. Use it.